Before Dead Space took us to the cold void of space, and before Resident Evil 4 redefined survival horror, there was a different kind of nightmare. One that came and went like a shadow in the storm. In 2005, a game launched that dropped players onto a creaking Russian whaling ship stranded in the middle of a violent ocean storm. You are alone, the wind screams, the ship tilts under your feet, and the bodies below the deck are moving. Cold Fear is a survival horror game that almost nobody talks about, but maybe they should. This was Ubisoft's first attempt at horror, and somehow it pulled off an incredible blend of tense atmosphere, real-time physics, dynamic environments, and over-the-shoulder combat before most games even dared to try. You battle grotesque creatures whose heads burst with parasites. You cling to rails as the ship violently tilts. Every aim feels unsteady. Every shadow could hide something waiting to kill you. And yet, somehow, Cold Fear vanished beneath the waves, overshadowed, forgotten, buried by time. But what if I told you this game still holds up? That it was ahead of its time? That if you missed it, you might have missed one of the most underrated horror experiences of its generation. And now, grab your raincoat as I take you to a creepy whaler ship and show you why Cold Fear makes it so hauntingly effective, and answer the question, is this survival horror game worth playing today? Cold Fear was developed by French studio Darkworks, the same team behind Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare, which is a great horror game. I really enjoyed it. Published by Ubisoft, it launched in March 2005 for PlayStation 2, Xbox and PC. Interestingly, it was Ubisoft's first survival horror game, created to compete with titles like Resident Evil and Silent Hill. The development team wanted to push boundaries with a fully dynamic environment, rain, waves, shifting gravity, all simulated in real time. And that's what sets Cold Fear apart. The entire first half of the game takes place aboard a massive Russian whaler violently rocking with the storm. It wasn't just for atmosphere, it affected your aiming, your movement, even how enemies reacted. Unfortunately, despite these innovations, Cold Fear was overshadowed by Resident Evil 4, which released just a few months earlier. Sales were modest, and Ubisoft quietly moved on from the title. Darkworks sadly would close down years later after financial troubles. At launch, Cold Fear received mixed reviews. Critics praised the setting and atmosphere, but criticized its derivative story and clunky controls. It scored in the 60s to low 70s on most platforms, but among horror fans, it quietly built a cult following. Over the years, it's been revisited by gamers who wanted something darker and grittier than the bombastic action of later Resident Evil titles. While it never got a sequel, Cold Fear remains a one-off horror experiment, flawed but fascinating. In Cold Fear, you play as Tom Hansen, a US Coast Guard officer who boards a mysterious Russian whaling ship to respond to a distress call. What begins as a simple search and rescue quickly spirals into a nightmare. The ship is deserted. Mostly. Its corridors are littered with the bodies of the crew, and something unnatural is stalking the decks. You soon uncover fragments of a story involving Russian bioweapons, military experiments, and a deadly organism that's taking over the humans in horrific ways. The plot is told through radio calls, documents, and disturbing environmental storytelling. And just when you think you figured it out, Cold Fear throws you a twist. But don't worry, we stay spoiler free here. Just know that the story blends Cold War paranoia, body horror, and the classic lone survivor vibe in a way that's compelling enough to keep you pushing forward. I had to say that the story is not bad. It has a bit of the Thing vibe, and there were a few parts which I really enjoyed and were unique. But there were also a few very generic parts too, but overall, it's an enjoyable story. At its core, Cold Fear is a third-person survival horror shooter. It uses an over-the-shoulder camera similar to Resident Evil 4, with a strong focus on aiming and precision. But here's a twist. The ship rocks constantly, due to the storm, and that movement affects both your aim and balance. This was a cool aspect. Enemies stagger, Tom stumbles, and sometimes you're forced to grab rails to avoid falling overboard. I had to say why the atmosphere of the game is good. I enjoyed the sound of the storm, the waves, and the mechanical sounds of the ship, but I found the action a bit too much. This could be a much more scary experience if you would not fighting constantly at every room you enter. The experience cannot be really scary because of the constant action. I just found it a bit too much for me, but that is maybe just my own preference. I like those horror games where things are a bit more quiet. I can say that Underdark the New Nightmare was much more better from this aspect. Combat is tense. Enemies, whether infected humans or worse, can only be killed by destroying their heads. Ammo conservation and precise aiming are crucial, and unlike other horror games, Cold Fear isn't afraid to throw enemies at you when you are least ready. What I enjoy but frustrated me at the same time regarding the combat is that there were many moments where I aimed at the head of an enemy, pulled the trigger, but the ship just tilted and my aim was off. If your ammo is limited, the health packs are limited. This can be a frustrating experience, but at the same time it is cool as very realistic. The controls can feel stiff by modern standards, especially in tight corridors, and while the game allows for both fixed camera and over-the-shoulder views, neither is perfect. It's clear this was a transitional era for camera design. The second half of the game moves away from the ship and into more typical horror environments, but the atmosphere remains good. Cold Fear excels in sound design too. Creaking metal, screaming wind adds to the feeling of isolation. The game uses a checkpoint save system, which means that you cannot save only if you reach the next checkpoint. While these locations are not too far away from each other, sometimes you are going to experience difficult situations where you have to start over from the checkpoint if you die. Also, when you are moving around the ship trying to figure out where you should go next, you could use a save point because if you went into the wrong way and wasted ammo and health, this could be an issue. I had to say that the save system caused me frustration throughout my gameplay quite a few times. Believe it or not, there is no in-game map. That's right. This is not a huge issue because the areas where you move are not that complex, but complex enough that it is hard to remember where you have to go if you need to backtrack, and it happens a few times. This was another thing which caused frustration throughout my gameplay. I just don't understand what was the purpose of the developers with this. Okay, there were a few things in the game which I found downright stupid. Just look at the intro. Here, we can see that the whole elite team has been wiped out soon after boarding the ship. From their gear, you can expect these guys are well trained, but they die as soon as they enter the ship. But you are the lone hero, the brave Coast Guard. I'm not familiar with the Coast Guard training, so correct me if I'm wrong, but they are probably not receiving combat training. Okay, I'm just picky, I know. Let's be real here. If the elite team would swipe through the ship and kill everything on board, there would be no game. So, yeah. But I still would prefer the good old contact is lost with the ship, you must investigate plot. Because in the intro, the mystery is already gone. What is happening on the ship? It is haunted, or zombies, monster took it over? If it's spoiled so early, the mystery is gone. Also, you speak Russian. You find some crew members alive early in the game who are hostile towards you. Why not try to talk to them? Why kill them straight away? It does not make any sense for me. And they are not zombies, as they are talking to each other. So, I just don't get it. But, my biggest complaint, I hate when this happens in games. You kill enemies with better weapons than yours, but of course you cannot take the weapons, because that would make sense. And, sense is not allowed on board. And, to answer to the main question of the video, is Cold Fear worth playing today? If you're a fan of survival horror and you already played the classics, then absolutely. It may not reinvent the genre, but its unique setting, dynamic environment and relentlessly eerie mood makes it a memorable ride. That said, you need to be patient with the controls and forgiving of the era. This is a game from the awkward middle-child phase of third-person shooters, ambitious but imperfect. Still, if you love atmospheric horror, Cold Fear is a solid title that deserves a second chance. It is not going to be my favorite horror game, and it may not have reached the heights of Resident Evil 4, but it carved its own place in horror history, quietly and in the shadows. And that's it, this game has been cleared from my backlog. I hope that you enjoyed this time travel back to the golden era of gaming. If you're not a member of our retro gaming community, join us by subscribing. Also, the YouTube algorithm shows some videos for you, it is on the screen now, check them out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next Backlog Quest video.